How's everybody doing? Say yeah.
Yeah!
My name is TJ Harris, and I'm an evangelist for the Midpoint Ministry Center of the Chicago Church of Christ. Thanks for tuning in to my new video series that I've started called Rooted. If this is your first time watching my videos, welcome. If you've watched my videos before, welcome back. I'm excited to present to you another Rooted video. I know it's been a while since I put out one, but there's been a lot going on. I've been preaching and studying the Bible with people, baptizing people, but nevertheless, I wanted to get back to doing a video for you. And of course, as I've always said, my goal in doing these videos is to help myself and to help others to become more deeply rooted in our relationship with God through the Bible. And right now, what you're getting from me is videos of me commenting on and discussing my personal Bible study of Paul's letter to the church in Colossae. Definitely check out my earlier videos if you missed them. I'm striving to make each video better than the last one. And so any feedback that you might have, any constructive criticism or anything like that, or any just, great job, TJ, I really appreciate this, let me know in the comment section below. It will be super helpful. Also, if you haven't saw it yet on my YouTube page, I'm doing this thing called Throwback Sermons. And basically, I'm posting sermons that I've done, whether it be recently or even when I was a missionary in Fiji, just sermons that I have the audio of. I'm going to post it on this YouTube channel so that you can perhaps listen to it in your car ride to work or back home from work or wherever. So I'm going to be doing that for you guys, so keep an eye out for those videos as well. With all that being said, let's jump back into Paul's letter to the church in Colossae. Now, this video is part 2 of a section in Paul's letter to the church in Colossae where Paul is saying some amazing things about Jesus. In my last video, I began breaking down Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 20, of which many biblical scholars believe that Paul was reciting what may be a poem or a hymn that describes the absolute supremacy of Jesus. Synonyms for the word supremacy are words like dominance, preeminence, reign, and sovereignty. In these verses, Paul does nothing but highlight the supremacy of Jesus, essentially in a poetically and lyrical fashion. When it comes to Paul uses the word all 7 times as he insists that Jesus is supreme over everything. In my last video, I highlighted how Paul said that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, all things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. My last video was a nearly 15-minute video of me breaking down what Paul said concerning Jesus and his supremacy over all creation and his role in creating all things. Furthermore, in this video, I'm going to finish covering Colossians chapter 1, verse 18 through 20, in which Paul highlights how not only is Jesus supreme over all creation, but how by his death and his resurrection, he reconciled all of creation back to himself. So let's together read Colossians chapter 1, verse 18 through 20. It reads, "And he," referring to Jesus, "is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." Again, Paul makes it clear that all creation is the result of Jesus. However, when it comes to all that Jesus himself created, his creation became broken. It became infected with a disease called sin. All of creation, including you and me, has been affected with a disease called sin. And what sin has done is caused all of us, it's caused all of humanity to have a sinful nature. The sinful nature is that aspect in humanity that makes us rebellious against God. When it comes to us as humanity, we as humanity have a natural inclination to sin. And what I mean is that given the choice to do God's will or our own, we will naturally choose to do our own thing. The proof that we all have a sinful nature is immeasurable. For example, no one has to teach a child to lie or to be selfish. Rather, we as parents, we go to great lengths to teach children to tell the truth and to put others first. When it comes to us as humanity, sinful behavior comes naturally. The news is filled with tragic examples of humanity acting sinfully. Wherever people are, there is sin. An author by the name of Charles Spurgeon once said, "As the salt flavors every drop in the Atlantic, so does sin affect every atom of our nature. It is so sadly there, so abundantly there, that if you cannot detect it, you are deceived." The Bible makes it clear that humanity is sinful, not just in theory or in practice, but by nature. Sin is a part of the very fiber of our being. According to Galatians chapter 5, verse 19 through 21 from the Bible, it reads, "The acts of the sinful nature are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like." The flesh and blood existence that we lead on this earth is shaped by our sinful nature. All of us have a sinful nature, and it affects every part of us. King Solomon from the Bible put it plainly when he said, "Not a single person on earth is always good and never sins." So how on earth did we as God's creation get to the point where we have such a sinful nature? You know, the Bible itself explains that God created humans and saw them as good and without a sinful nature. God created humans to be like himself, right? However, as most people know, Genesis chapter 3 from the Bible records the disobedience of Adam and Eve, the very first humans. By their one act of disobedience to God, sin entered into their nature. You know, they were immediately stricken with a sense of shame and guilt, and they hid from God's presence. Consequently, when they had children, their sinful nature passed along to their offspring. The very first child born to Adam and Eve was known as Cain. Cain's sinful nature manifested itself into him becoming the very first murderer, having murdered his very own brother named Abel. From that point on and from generation to generation, the sinful nature was passed down to all humanity. Romans chapter 5 verse 12 from the Bible reads, "Sin came into the world through one man, and his sin brought death with it. As a result, death has spread to the whole human race because everyone has sinned." This verse presents the unsettling truth that our sinful nature leads inevitably to death. Other consequences of the sinful nature are hostility towards God. Paul wrote that the sinful mind is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those controlled by the sinful nature cannot please God. When it comes to us as humanity and our sinful nature, our relationship with God was not looking good. However, there is only one person in the history of the world who did not have a sinful nature and has pleased God in every way, and that person is Jesus. Jesus' virgin birth allowed him to enter into our world, bypassing the curse of sin passed down by Adam. Jesus then lived a sinless life of absolute perfection. He is the holy and righteous one who had no sin. This allowed Jesus to be the perfect sacrifice for our sin. Writing to early Christians, the Apostle Peter wrote, "For you know that it is not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your forefathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. He was chosen before the creation of the world, but was revealed in these last times for your sake. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and glorified him, so your faith and hope are in God." So understand this, not only is Jesus the agent of creation, but he is also the agent of a new creation called the redeemed. The event that marked the beginning of this new creation was Jesus' resurrection. Going back to Colossians chapter 1 verse 18, Paul wrote that Jesus is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead. This is a reference to the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus' resurrection marked the beginning of the new creation and a new era prophesied about during Old Testament times. Now, let me be clear in saying that Paul did not mean that Jesus is the first to have ever risen from the dead. He is not. You know, there have been several resurrections described in the Bible that took place before Jesus rose from the dead. But Jesus' resurrection, guys, was like no other. His resurrection is the preeminent resurrection. It is because he rose from the dead that we as Christians shall also one day rise from the dead. When it comes to Jesus, and because he rose from the dead, his new creation, meaning those who believe in him and place their trust in his work on the cross, will also rise from the dead. As his new creation, meaning those who believe in him and place their trust in his work on the cross, we become grafted into the body of Jesus, which is the church. And appropriately, Paul says that Jesus is the head of his body, the church. So what does Jesus being the head of the church mean? You know, what that means is that Jesus is the leader of the church. He is the coach of this team. But more than that, he is the very reason that the church exists. We as the church exist because Jesus died for it to exist. No one else created the church, only Jesus did. This means we belong to him. When it comes to the church is an organism. It is a living body, and only Jesus gives life to his church by way of his Holy Spirit. Man, I've got so much more to cover. There's so much good stuff in this passage. If you like what you've heard so far, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you've not done so yet. Moving on to more of what Paul expounds upon in Colossians chapter 1, verse 18 through 20. Paul moves on to highlighting how God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, meaning Jesus, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Simply put, guys, it is through Jesus' incarnation and atoning death that God's wrath was satisfied, and peace between God and sinful humanity is restored. As the Bible makes clear, Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Jesus will ultimately crush all rebellion against God. For us as believers, this means that there can be reconciliation between us and God. It means that the broken relationship that Adam and Eve initiated in the Garden of Eden can be restored. This is why Jesus is so utterly necessary for us to put our faith in and to trust, because without him, we live in rebellion against God. Without Jesus, we have the wrath of God coming right at us. And because of our sinful nature, there is no escaping the wrath of God. But with Jesus, we have the hope of peace and reconciliation with God. And the basis for this peace is his blood, which was shed on the cross. The death of Jesus and his subsequent resurrection is the pivotal point in human history. Because of Jesus' work, God's corrupted creation is recreated into a new creation. Jesus and only Jesus is the sole redeemer of our broken universe. We as creation are broken, but Jesus came to completely mend our brokenness. And let me be clear in saying this. Jesus is not one of many ways to mend our brokenness. He is the only mender of our brokenness. So that's it for today's video, guys. More videos to come. Please be praying for my efforts to put out more videos and more content for you and your personal Bible study and just your own personal relationship with God. Go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you've not done so yet. Also, leave a comment in the comment section below. Like and share this video with a friend or whoever. But as always, much love, and to God be the glory.